This is actually a terrific segue to the next panel. The key takeaway for that panel for me was that when we talk about education, it's really from pre-K through adult lifelong learning, which is really includes and encompasses what happens outside the classroom, which is really the topic of this next panel, which is all about what is the rest of life like outside the classroom? How is education? The entirety of education is not what takes place in the classroom and not what you read in the books, but there's a broader context to it. And so with that, I'd like to bring back Kameka Dempsey, who you met earlier. And Kameka, I think you need no introduction at this point. It's all yours.
Great, thank you. So I'm just seeing all of our panelists joining us right now. Fantastic. We have some extra folks on the screen, so I just want to make sure we have everyone. Fantastic. Okay, so it looks like we're good to go. So this conversation, I'm excited to welcome my panelists to this conversation, which is really about student life outside of the classroom. A lot of the conversation about safely reopening schools thus far that we've had today has really been about what it looks like to be in a classroom or in a school, a traditional school environment, whether that be in the K-12 space or in higher education. But what we haven't really had a chance to chat about is what student life looks like outside of the classroom, what it looks like from the perspective of when the schools abruptly shut earlier this year in March and April, and then what have we learned and what should we be doing as we go forward. So I am very excited to welcome a team of panelists today to tackle that very complex and challenging issue. Joining us today, we have Justin Hershman, who is a rising first-year student at NYU and recent graduate of Polytechnic High School. So congratulations on your graduation and congratulations on what's to come. We are also joined by Jordan Hershman, who is also, as you can probably tell, the twin of Justin, and is also a 2020 graduate of Polytechnic High School. Congratulations to you as well. He will be taking a gap year and attending Yale University in the fall of 2021. Our third student is a rising high school senior, Sarah Shapiro, and she is, very interestingly enough, and I can't wait to hear more about her story, the co-founder of something called COVID-19 Project, which has really been engaging students not only from a support perspective, but really about this outside of the classroom activities perspective. Also joining us are two folks who are in the higher education and academic perspective or space, which is Dr. Kafele Khalfani, who is the Dean of Student Affairs at Earl Warren College at UC San Diego, as well as Dr. Scyatta Wallace, who is joining us, and she is a professor in psychology at St. John's University in New York City, and we'll be, hopefully hearing from them about some of the challenges that we are seeing from both a mental health perspective, but also what it's like based on student life on campus. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is just quickly go around the room and really learn from you all. What had you seen once schools shut down in the spring, and give us a brief glimpse into what it was like from your perspective once the schools closed, with particular lens to life outside the classroom. So you all were involved in supporting students in some different way, or whether you're a student yourself, and so I'd love to hear from you. So why don't we start with Jordan for this one?
Hi everyone. I think in my personal experience, life outside of the classroom kind of just disappeared once we transitioned to online learning. It started picking up again as we began to realize that this was something that was going to be a long-term problem for us, and people tried to make more connections with other students. But for the most part, extracurricular activities, meetings between different students online just didn't happen once we transitioned to online. And I think that's something that can happen a lot more in the coming year, as we realize that this is something that we have to try to build the best possible version of. But in my experience, once we transitioned to online learning, there weren't a lot of outside the classroom opportunities for engagement.
Great. And Justin, what about you? What was your experience like?
I mean, for me, it was very hectic. I had previously had a concussion leading up to like when school ended for us, or we had at-home learning. But it was hectic. There was no clear format for where we would get our information from, where to find the links to the Zooms. It wasn't something that had been planned out properly, and you couldn't figure out how to continue having a social life and keep up with your schoolwork because it was something that we hadn't experienced before and no one knew what they were doing. So I don't think it was handled very well at all.
And Sarah, what about you? What did you experience?
I mean, at first it was just so hectic. We didn't really have a separation between school and our home life because, you know, your classroom was now your bedroom. So it got to the point where you really didn't have that access to going outside of school and having that outlet that a lot of people have, that safe space. I mean, I know I, for one, am involved in a ton of extracurriculars, and that was really my home outside of school. So not having that outlet, it created a lot of issues. And also, as Jordan and Justin were saying, it really wasn't planned out to start out with. I mean, our teachers, they didn't really know how long it was going to be. I had teachers saying it would be like 2 weeks. Little did they know it ended up being a whole semester now going into another one. And we didn't have online instruction yet. So we just had teachers posting assignment after assignment, and there weren't really any guidelines as to how long it could be. So then it started being that our entire days were at home just doing work. We no longer had time for activities, and it's not like we had an outlet to even do them in the first place. So I think it was just really hectic, and there wasn't a separation between school and home.
Great. And Kafele, you know, having students on campus and then having to send them back, what did that look like?
It was hectic. I joke it was sort of like the scene in Titanic after they hit the iceberg and they're trying to get everyone off, where it really is trying to make sure, one, that we got students off campus as quickly and as safely as possible, because this happened for us. We were towards the end of our quarter, so we were right before finals. And as things started shutting down, people were concerned that they weren't going to be able to get home. So depending on what was being shut down, we had students who were in other countries who might not have been able to get back. So there was a lot of that stress and anxiety, in addition to, oh, and I have finals next week. So we did try as best that we could to lessen that concern. So reaching out to our faculty to see if they could make changes with finals to offer the maximum amount of flexibility that we can do, but that's still with a lot of anxiety for everyone because, you know, at this point, faculty and staff are also pivoting because schools are starting to shut down. So anyone who has family, anyone who has older parents, you know, you're sort of stuck in this working between your personal life and your job. And so the big thing was just finishing out the quarter. And then the good thing, at least for us, is that we were going right into spring break. So we had a little bit of time to start planning because we wouldn't have been programming at that point in the year anyway, because no one goes, like, at a certain point, they stop coming because it's all about finals. And so we had a little bit more time to start preparing for when spring came in. But it was hectic. And so there was a lot of flexibility, a lot of pivoting. So if you heard the word pivot one more time, you know, I would not have to go on unemployment if I had $1 for every time we heard pivot. Or unprecedented. So there was a lot of being flexible and really rolling and working with that.
Excellent. And lastly, Scyatta, what were you seeing with your own environment with students?
Yeah, I think that the word for everybody was definitely, you know, lots of change quickly, right? And what I think from my perspective, what I saw most was stress. You know, people were just completely stressed out, worried, unsure, and the children were feeling that too. You know, so on campus, obviously, they're old enough to know what's going on, old enough to kind of read the news and make assessments for themselves. But also in my work with organizations and with youth, it's clear that the children were also feeding off of the fears of their parents as well. You know, nightmares, young people, you know, little kids wetting their beds and things like that, where they didn't know what was going on unconsciously, but they did have a sense and they were very concerned. So there was a lot of stress, a lot of fear, and psychologists have been tracking this over time, and we do know that, you know, a lot of mental health concerns were starting or getting worse in that sort of initial round of uncertainty during that time.
And, you know, I think this highlights one particular thing that I'd love to hear from Justin and Jordan, particularly because you had sort of the moment of graduation that was then also coming for you all. And, you know, it sounds like, you know, everyone was experiencing the hectic nature and uncertain nature of how long is this going to last? Is this going to be a couple of weeks? Are we going to be able to kind of go back to everything like we were, or is it going away? And the uncertainty around that. What were then the alternate plans that arrived or just sort of popped up for, you know, the moments like graduation that become capstones of one's school experience?
Well, so I was part of a committee of students at my school to try to plan those end of year events to have some semblance of what they would have looked like in a pre-COVID world. And really that whole process was just creating a bunch of plan A's, plan B's, and plan C's to try to get as close to a normal experience as possible. Ultimately, we ended up having to go with a lot of plan C's because things didn't get better on the timeline that we really wanted them to. So we just had to transition to trying to create these events either virtually or having some sort of distance graduation. We ended up doing a car line where students all drive up to a place to graduate to get their diploma and take pictures. So it really was a process of just gradually coming to terms with what would be acceptable and possible and realistic in this new reality, and trying to create the best alternative possible so that students can have the most fulfilling experience possible to end their time in high school.
Right. And then with respect to things like, you know, end of year school plays, what were your experiences with that? Did they suddenly just say, well, now everybody be in your own home and do your lines at home? Like, or were they just canceled? Were they postponed? What happened? Justin, tell us a little bit about, I know you were involved in some of those activities.
Yes, they were. I mean, Jordan participated in the final musical that we had, where literally people would record themselves and send in the videos, and they would patch them all together in a little Zoom thing. And that was our final musical. But all our activities were pretty much canceled or made so you could try and do them at home. But for me, my biggest extracurricular, I guess, was I was leading the BSU this year. And for us in the BSU, we had gone a whole year of trying to plan stuff, trying to work with the school. And all of a sudden we got home and we couldn't do anything. We couldn't contact the administration. Students didn't want to come online because they were tired. They were sick of being on their laptop all day. So doing anything just became almost impossible. And when you could try and find stuff to do, it just had no resemblance to the actual thing anymore.
Yeah, and you know, Scyatta, I would love to hear your perspective on this, because what I'm hearing from Jordan and from Justin is, you know, this idea of fatigue, but then also, you know, issues of access, right? Access to people that you need in order to facilitate activities happening, but then also access to infrastructure. And so what are some of the impacts that you're seeing in your work, Scyatta, with students when, you know, all of this chaos ensued in the spring?
Yeah, you know, I definitely know that people really struggled, particularly at the beginning, with not only access to the actual infrastructure in terms of computer access, Wi-Fi access, space to be able to even have a quiet time, whether it's learning or being able to have quiet time with your friends online. These were all really difficult things for young people to have to navigate. And I think the main thing, I think, for all of this is that we were learning how to have a lot more empathy for other people, because maybe parents were struggling with their own situation in terms of financially not really being able to know if they were going to have a job. So they may not have been able to give their children the amount of attention or focus that they needed. And with the schools being so focused on making sure that they were sticking with their lesson plans, that they weren't necessarily seeing that student organizations needed some support, or there were other things that they weren't attending to, like arts programs, et cetera, that they probably needed to for people's mental health. And I think that there are a lot of lessons that we need to collect and bring that forward as we think about reopening the schools. And that's one thing that I'm not seeing as clearly in our discussions. How are we going to create a more holistic environment to support our young people so that they can be healthy and they can be a lot more, I would say, whole and less anxious about what we're about to embark on, which is, a huge undertaking.
Absolutely. And Kafele, from your perspective, when you are on campus and then you have to be, responsible for all of these students, and then you have to safely get them off campus. And that is a real clear, especially when you're in a campus environment, life outside of the classroom is really what makes the place sing, if you will. What were some of the, observations that you had when that was taking place?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was dealing with all of the ideas that we had for what we want to do, but we still have to deal with people's basic needs first. So there was a lot of that we were dealing with. So making sure that people had access to the technology that they needed, that they had access to funds, that they needed, that sort of dealing with the stress associated with that, because we were already having some concerns with getting folks in for CAPS, which is our counseling and psychological services, which is a main service. But we found actually shockingly that some of the things that we're doing now that they were online, we're getting much better responses. So it really is trying to find a way to use the tools that we have now to best recreate what we had on campus as best we can, because, Zoom fatigue is super real. And, we can't, there's only so much of that we can do. And it's really trying to figure out as many other platforms that we can use to do that. So trying to do podcasts where we can do that, using, Instagram and the other TikToks and things just to sort of entertain and to engage. But trying to do as many different things to try and recreate that, but also managing expectations and letting folks know that the way we did things before is not the way that we're going to do them, especially during this. So when you're looking at the classes that you're taking, you can roll back on some of the classes if you need to. If you need to take some time off, take the time off. We're not, well, I can speak for my institution. We're not going anywhere. Most of us are not going anywhere. And even if the institution that you're at does go somewhere, there's more than enough. Well, the rest of us will take you. But you need to do what's right, because I've been joking with some of our folks. They're very excited to finish school to do what? Go work from home again still, because nothing. So, if you need to take some time off, you can take it and we can make that time up in the end, or you can use that to really explore. Education is not necessarily about a degree and getting a job. It's about learning. And so really finding something that is going to enrich you and enrich your spirit, especially during this time. Because once this gets over with, you will all have many, many years of work ahead of you. Many, like 50. So you can take this time now to just do what's best for you and for your spirit and for your soul, because work will be here when you get back. So.
Absolutely. And I think what you just said, Kafele, really dovetails nicely into what Sarah was mentioning earlier about, really being in front of a laptop all day and not having time or space even to then consider what extracurricular activities or other things might look like for you. So Sarah, I'll just turn to you for a moment. What was the moment, or when was the moment that you realized that you could do something about addressing life outside of the academic realm with respect to collecting students and creating some of these experiences with the COVID-19 project. And just, you know, before you respond, I would just like to share with our listeners, the COVID-19 project is something that Sarah is a co-founder of, that has really provided an opportunity for students, no matter where you are in the country, to connect into some activities. So you can do things like gymnastics, or you can do things like music, or you can even do some tutoring. So Sarah, why don't you tell us a little bit about what that moment was when you thought, wow, there's something I can do here?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, like thinking about how all the extracurriculars were canceled, I'm an avid speech and debate competitor, so I'm normally like traveling around the country getting to share my voice about things I'm genuinely passionate about. So I did a speech last year about combating educational inequalities, and I saw that a lot of those were exacerbated in, as everyone says, the big word is unprecedented times. I mean, we really haven't seen something like this before, at least not in my lifetime and a lot of yours. Really, my mom is an educator, so I witnessed firsthand how students were struggling to adapt to distance learning. And so when I saw that a lot of the issues that they were facing, I mean, I know for me, I couldn't compete in speech anymore. I'm in a cappella, you can't really do that virtually. And trying to figure out a lot of those things since they were canceled, I needed somewhere to channel that energy and that purpose that I had. So I created the COVID-19 project with my best friend. We recruited a ton of other people in our community. And so what the project is we have free daily activities ranging from athletics to academics to arts. And we also have one-on-one tutoring. So right now we have nearly 1,000 students, and we founded this a few months ago, and they're all around the world in 12 different countries actually right now. And it's been a really amazing experience because we have over 200 teen mentors. So not only is this creating an opportunity for the people we're serving, being students that are in 1st through 5th, but we do have some that are younger and older as well joining us, but also for the teens, it's given them an outlet to be able to lead these activities. I've heard a big theme. I was here for the other panel as well, and listening to how they said about, you know, gaining experience that's not necessarily that has to do with a degree. And I think the idea of being able to work as a leader is just so important. And being able to work as a leader outside the classroom and providing these activities to students is just really the goal of it. And because they're ranging from athletics to academics to arts, they're really able to go and find disciplines they may not have been able to explore otherwise. So I think it's a really amazing opportunity for these students.
Thank you. And so Jordan, you know, just turning back to you for a moment, what was the process like for you to think about, you know, you're at this pivotal moment in your education where you complete high school and you imagine that you're going to be going off to college in the fall and things should be normal, but then we get hit with a global pandemic. We have a ton of racial unrest in the country. And then you as a student are then, you know, faced with the decision about what do you want to do in the fall or for the next school year. So tell us a little bit about, you know, what you're thinking has had to be during this time.
Yeah, so I mean, there were a lot of factors that went into my decision ultimately. But I guess there were two main factors that ultimately drove me to decide to make gap year. One was the question of how can I really best take advantage of the year ahead, and if going to college and having whatever that experience looked like would be the way to do that. And secondly, thinking about the fact that college is really a 4-year experience, with each year building off the years that came before. And so part of me was really worried that if I didn't get to have that normal college experience in year one, if I didn't get to bond with my peers outside of the classroom, if I didn't get to take part in all the extracurriculars that I was passionate about, if that would affect the entire 4-year experience and completely throw me off course and make it into something that I didn't want it to become. So outside of even the concerns of having another year taking classes over Zoom and just not having that traditional experience, ultimately it really boiled down to the fact that I wanted these 4 years to be the best that I could have them be. And I was concerned that if I had to do what college looked like this coming year, I wouldn't be able to really optimize that experience and make it into what I most wanted to be. So then I decided to take a gap year ultimately.
Right. And then Justin, you know, for you, same question, you know, how did you, what's been on your mind and how have you been navigating your thinking?
I mean, it's been a hard choice, but as someone who has ADHD and anxiety, I know that spending a year at home is hard for me. So even though I will be going to New York and currently all my classes are online, the opportunity to still be able to see people, even if they're only in my dorm, and engage in that kind of way is something that I wanted to be able to do. But it's been hard. We just got new information yesterday, so I now have to go in 2 weeks earlier than I had planned for. So I have to change my hotel and change my flights to quarantine. And just the lack of information that they are able to give us, and that they even know where to begin on what to give us. You can't make a plan for what you're going to do because your plan will keep changing. So, I mean, it was a hard decision, but I think that the ability to be on campus, even if it's limited, for someone like me, is far more valuable than being at home, because I am simply unable to be at home. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand. Yeah.
Right. And Kafele, you know, what are your observations, you know, as you hear these comments?
I love the conversation because that is the conversation that we all need to have, and we need to have that on an individual basis. So each of the students needs to have, to do that discernment and say, what is the experience that I want to have, or what is the experience I need to have, and then use that to inform your decision. So it's not, I graduated from high school, I have to go to college. No, you don't. So you need to make sure that all of the environment is right for you, that you're going to be going to into an institution that you're excited about, studying something that you're excited about and genuinely interested in learning. The timing of that is all up to you. So whether you do that in 4 years, which is the average, and I use average with the biggest quotes ever, that most people take upwards of 5 to 6 years to graduate, because life happens, opportunities happen. You want to go in a different direction. There's going to be something that entices you that may extend that, and there are other people who finish super quick. So that experience is for you to determine, and it has to be right for you because you're the one who has to do the work, and you're the one who has to pay for that. So really making sure that you're making the decision that's right for you, and it doesn't have to be right for anybody else but you. And so just know that as you're making that decision, that make sure it's right for you and everything feels right for you because you're the one who has to do that work. So.
And Scyatta, you know, I'm curious to know what your observations have been, given, you know, you work with some of our vulnerable students and communities, and that, you know, some people are having these conversations, but I think particularly around some of our younger students, we're not having some of these same activities and conversations around how do we get them the development that they need outside of the classroom. And so curious to know what your thoughts are based on what your observations have been.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first thing that I want to say is I want to thank the young panelists for just showing us their resilience. You all are just so brilliant and innovative, and I want to just highlight that. And I think that we can learn so much from you. I kind of wish we had, you know, panels and panels filled with young people who have been so brave and courageous and creative like you all, so thank you. But I think that the main thing that I wish we would all be doing is slowing down a little bit, and really taking time to breathe and to dialogue about how we're actually really feeling about all of this, so that our young people can speak to us, whether they're 5 or whether they're 15 or whether they're 50, you know, whatever it is in terms of their student age. Because it's all part of the process. Like, we cannot learn if we're just overwhelmed emotionally. And so I think, you know, it's important to talk about vulnerable populations, but I think we're all in a vulnerable situation right now. And that's one thing that I want to just put out there, is that we should really try to create spaces for young people to talk, to be able to allow them to just express themselves and how they're feeling. And also to be able to share some of the things that they have been adapting to in their resilience, so that we can learn and maybe do what they're doing. I know that there's a lot more older people that are now on TikTok and things like that, doing goofy things and crazy dances and everything. And so they've brought joy into our lives where we've been really serious. And so we can learn from each other. But I do want to say that focusing on young people that are homeless, unstably housed, young people that are in homes that are violent, young people that have to take care of their siblings, we really need to pay attention to their needs and not just the academic side. And also not even necessarily just the mental health side, but like you said, extracurricular. How are we going to allow them to have joy and to have a time to be young still in all of this? And I think that asking the question is probably the first step.
Great.
Can I just add something really quick
Yes.
about the part about vulnerable populations? Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Awesome. So I just wanted to add, yeah, I think it's so important because, so I don't know if I included this, but what I've been doing with my efforts is we have over 200 activities per week. So they change on a weekly basis. So it's like we have hundreds and hundreds of activities for kids to choose from, but it's not just extracurriculars because something that we found is there's not a lot of kids that have an outlet to talk about these things and the stresses and what's affecting them. We start with something every single day. It's called morning mindfulness. And it's just an outlet for kids from all around the world to be able to talk about what's going on right now, because a lot of these kids, they have all these anxieties about what's occurring and they don't really have an outlet to share that. And we've also been reaching out to a lot of different like foster care networks and youth shelters because a lot of them don't have that outlet to talk about these things either. So I think it's really important for not only for us to be focusing on teens. I know that we're more aware of what's happening in terms of at schools and stuff like that, but a lot of younger kids, they're feeding off of the stress and anxieties of their parents. So it's really important to ensure they have an outlet outside as well, because I think that not a lot of the conversation, it's more about the school for them and maybe some extracurriculars, but not necessarily the mental health of these students and the fact that now, you know, their classrooms are the same as their home and they don't really have an outlet to speak with others. So I just wanted to add that in.
That's a fantastic point. I mean, so brilliant. But that's why I'm so excited that you are here and part of this conversation, because it truly is my belief, you know, if you ask students, they will tell you. They will tell you what they need. They will tell you what to do. And so it's so fantastic to have you all as part of this conversation because it's needed. And I think, you know, now more than ever, as we still have time, right? I think I'm in the mindset that, you know, school has not across the board begun officially yet. And so this whole day has been about safely reopening schools. And there is still time to think about what the solutions might be holistically around life at a school, whether that's in the classroom or outside of the classroom. And so I'm so grateful for all of you for sharing your perspectives. So now as we shift to, you know, the conversation in terms of looking forward, based on what you know now, how should we be thinking about student life in a virtual world, at least for now? And, you know, Justin, let's start with you because you identified that, you know, that kind of went into a little bit of your thinking about what next year is going to look like for you. So what should we be doing?
I think one thing that I noticed as a senior when I was going through online learning was a lot of the tension was taken from the students and onto just like maintaining a regular school schedule. But online learning is not regular school. We can't sit on a computer and go back to back from our classes and then go after our classes are over and start homework on our computer. There needs to be an adjustment so that kids are able to take breaks, have shorter classes, change their schedule so that they can take time for themselves, because no one wants to sit in their bed and do classes all day. And I also think for college students, we need to make sure that there is a way for them to communicate, because as a high schooler, and even trying to reach out to my professors now, it's hard to contact people because everyone's so busy trying to figure out what they're doing and how they're going to run the school or their classroom that they don't have time to answer the students. But we have questions too, and we need to figure out what we're doing. And if we don't have a way to figure out what we're doing and access people that can help us, we're just going to be stranded and there's nothing we can do. So I think we need to take some time to focus on students and what students need instead of just trying to maintain a regular schedule, because virtual learning is not in-class learning.
And I'm just curious, Scyatta, when you think about what we should be doing going forward, thinking across the spectrum of students, what things should we be accounting for that we've been missing because the initial out of school online shift was abrupt and not planned?
Yeah, I mean, I think we had no choice but to just kind of jump up and do stuff. But I think we're still forgetting about the holistic experience of our young people. We have not finished with the pandemic. We are probably about to enter a whole nother experience that we don't know what that's going to be, but we do know at least flu season is going to be rough. So I think that we have to be prepared for meeting their emotional needs, meeting the fatigue that was just spoken about by all the students, saying they can't do this Zoom and online over and over at all hours. We can't expect to be filling their schedules and their calendars up and being busy like how we were before the pandemic happened. We just have to really slow it down for everybody, and allow people to have the space that they need and to find a way to connect, like what are going to be our off online ways of connecting? Are we going to be able to, try to have more downtime with our loved ones, either, family dinners for those who are able to isolate in their homes and that kind of thing? Maybe I've been with my family just saying, I don't want a Zoom, I just want a phone call. To me, it feels more connected for some reason. What other ways are we going to be able to find outlets for our young people? I think very important to start the school year by just having time to just talk. We don't have to jump right into the curriculum, and doing that throughout the school year will be very important to gauge how we need to support our young people throughout the process. But it can't just be the regular curriculum. It has to be based on the time.
And Kafele, in your role, you're responsible for student affairs and really the holistic experience for students. How do we get to a place where we make those virtual activities available to all of them? And by the way, also make it fun?
Good question. That is what I've spent most of the day trying to figure out, or us really trying to figure out what is going to work. Because you, again, have to deal with the fact that most of us, even at work, have been on Zoom all day. And the last thing you want to do is be on Zoom again. So what are different ways that we can do that? And what are some ways that we can try and manage to do that? So we've tried everything. We've tried podcast. We've tried collaborative tutorials where let's all get some materials and do that. So even though we may still be online, we tried to do what can we rebroadcast also on YouTube at the same time. So if worst comes to worst, you can at least cast it to the television. So you're not fully looking at a TV, like you're looking at a big monitor, but it's not your computer. So really trying to come up with those creative ways. Really Sarah's talking about mindfulness. So stressing that and things that folks can do, finding time to create a space for yourself to go out and walk. Even if it's just for 10 minutes to get outside of your house, finding ways that you can get together while being socially distant. And it's ever changing. And so it really is continuing to talk with other folks to see what they're doing, having conversations with our students to see what do you need or what's going to be helpful for you. And it is sort of switching around. So not every conversation is via Zoom. You can still have a phone conversation occasionally. So that it does work that way. To try and do that. I keep joking that we're going to get back to letter writing at some point as well. So just, doing that. And so it really is about being creative and tamping back the expectation on that, because we're not going to be able to give you the same experience that we would be able to give you on person, because doing anything in person is going to exacerbate the current problem. So we can't rely on that. And we sort of keep joking that once we do come back to campus, woohoo, it's going to be a party. But until then, we're just going to have to really manage things back, take it a lot slower than we're doing, taking a lot more time to breathe, giving people a lot more space, and really having different expectations to meet the needs of folks, and really trying to stress the connection, even if it's small. So, A lot of the work that we're going to be doing for folks who live on campus, it's going to be a lot of your in-unit work. So you and your roommate are going to be the bestest of friends. Or if you're in a suite, your suite mate. So that becomes your new family. And how do we sort of build that relationship and build interaction with each other without being, together with the other folks who are in your hall. So it really is a lot of, we joke that we're gonna give everybody noodles so they can stay 6 feet apart, and just walk around with those all day. And there's a part of I joke, but that's the other part about it, is really maintaining a sense of humor about this, because, we think we might have right answers, but we will not know if they're right for months. So at this point, try and stay in as good humor as you can, and try and have as much fun and just relax and let it go. Because the more we try and control it, the worse it's gonna be. So just try and do what we can do that's best for us. So, and we try it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, all right, we'll try it again tomorrow. So.
I see Andy's back, but I'm going to ask one more question to Jordan before we do our last round from everyone on the panel. This is a fantastic discussion, by the way. Jordan, really curious what your thoughts are on, how do we make sure that students who are taking time off, a gap year, et cetera, are really engaged in life and connecting with other students outside of the classroom?
Yeah, I think it's important for students like me and other students in similar situations that we kind of redefine what the campus community is, because generally it's just the students who are on campus at the time taking classes for the university. But if you broaden the definition of community a little bit, kind of what Sarah's doing with the COVID-19 project, where you expand it so that people from all over the country, people from all different areas connecting with each other, just staying involved, doing something to make them feel like they're a part of something. Then I think that's the way that you can make sure that individuals who may not be able to, or may not be choosing to take part in the traditional campus experience, or going to a college, taking online classes, staying involved in that way, are still staying involved with other peers and doing something to make themselves a little more fulfilled and feel like they're really a part of something.
Great, thank you. That's a really pragmatic suggestion and recommendation, and leads to what I'd like the rest of our panelists to share, which is one very pragmatic tip or question for consideration as people want to create and maintain a vibrant life outside of the classroom, whether that's in person, virtual, or hybrid. So Sarah, why don't we go to you next?
I think what's so important to remember is that we really need a sense of purpose, of community. If we're continuing to have this Zoom fatigue, seeing one screen to the next, a lot of us, we're not able to work towards our fullest potential. And I think that providing outlets for students to find that purpose, that drive to keep going, I think that's so important. So whether that's like sending a newsletter to your students with different resources outside the classroom that they can partake in, or just letting them know about different opportunities that exist just for channels of communication and discussion, I think that's the most important thing.
Great, thank you. And how about you, Justin?
My message would probably be to students, because as a student, I know sometimes it can be hard to find a voice or a platform to speak on regarding the school and your school life. So right now we have the ability to actually communicate with our administrations about what we need and how we can better succeed in our schools. And I think that we need to use that for right now and also for the future. As someone with ADHD again, we've been asking to get recorded presentations or slideshows that we can review later, and we were always told no, until now where they're finally doing it. And that's something that we can make sure they keep doing. So I think this is something that can be used to help us in the future. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Scyatta, how about you?
Yeah, I would definitely say that this is primarily for parents and people that work with young people, but youth as well, is that we should really try to figure out how we're going to connect with our young people emotionally throughout all of this. Really preparing conversations ahead of time. If you haven't already, sit down and talk about how they're feeling about the upcoming school openings, and really try to help them through that process now and as it continues. What are we going to do when the first cases happen? How are we going to talk to our young people? How are we as a family going to get through that? These are things that we know inevitably are going to happen. And I think if you create that environment now, it helps to decrease some of the anxiety, and then hopefully will decrease some of the mental health issues that we will see as time goes on with the pandemic. So really creating more emotionally connected relationships with our young people, that I think is really key. And then also the optimism, you know, from looking at people like the young people on this panel, we can all see that we're going to get through this. And young people are the ones that are going to, I think, lead us through a lot of the stuff that we're seeing. They're creating the innovation.
Great. Last 20 seconds, Kafele, before we bring Andy back.
This is an opportunity for transformative change in our world. And for when we come out of this, that the world will be entirely different. So take advantage of that opportunity and let's make it better for everyone.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank all of my panelists for this vibrant and amazing conversation. Your candor, bravery was fantastic, and I think will really be impactful for those who are listening, who are really thinking about what to do as we consider safely reopening schools. Now back over to Andy for our next panel. Thank you again.